Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Welcome back to F1 News, and what a disastrous weekend it's been so far at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Controversy on and off the track, but the biggest story of the day remains that Hamilton out in Q1 for the first time since 2017 and on pure pace for the first time since 2009. Very much intriguing your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. On the verge of 500. Firstly, this is what Toto says before the day even kicks off. Last night, I'm sure you guys are aware, the drivers are up until like 3 AM local time discussing whether they feel safe enough to actually continue the race weekends. Seemingly they were pressured to some degree by team bosses or whatever, by F1 themselves, like yeah, we need to do this race. They believe it's safe enough to do this race with the missile attack that went down just like 6 or so miles from the track during day 1. The drivers weren't happy about it. Apparently Hamilton, Alonso and some others were making their thoughts very clear that they didn't really feel safe enough to race this weekend, and seemingly after that kind of discussion they had into the hours of the morning, that the drivers were unanimous in their decision to not want to race this weekend. But and still the decision was being awaited. These are kind of shots through the window here that went down last night. But then the team racer, well, the principals came back. They were told something or other that made them either change their mind or got forced into it, or whatever the case might be. They put up some sort of stand, but obviously it wasn't enough. Money talks, right? We talked about this yesterday. It's just how it is. And it's also just so frustrating, not just to see that this happens, but also to see what happened during the practice sessions, and also qualifying with just the way this track was designed. We talked about it last year, right? And if anything got away with one, that there wasn't some major incident last season. And I mean, there was a major incident today. Thankfully, it seems like Mick Schumacher's okay. But it's just the way this track is designed, man. It's just I watched the F2 like sprint race earlier today. Just every single lap, there's some chaos going on. There's crashes. Like safety cars are coming out. It's an absolute disaster, and the marshals don't really seem to be on top of things all that much. Like just from start to finish, it's been an awful weekend. I think Hamilton says, of course it will, for many reasons, that he just can't wait to get out of it, to be perfectly honest. Seemingly, the drivers were unanimous in not wanting to race, but then the team principals came in. Further dialogue with the F1 bosses led to business as usual. Like, I mean, look, I just saw this as I thought was kind of funny, to be honest, the whole no war thing that went around about the Ukraine-Russia situation, and then when there's literally a war zone like a few miles from the racetrack, when this kind of money is involved, because the problem is for F1, right, is like, because Saudi Aramco sponsor pretty much everything, one of the teams, the whole Stroll operation, like it's all over, plus it's all over the tracks all across the world. They can't just, they can't just forfeit that, but they've painted themselves into a corner here, right, which is just not a good look for the sport. Like, it just seems like it's kind of tearing itself apart at the moment, at least from the upper echelons of things. And I mean, this also went down, if you guys didn't spot this, there was a marshal who was working, he basically did a tweet saying he hopes Lewis Hamilton has a Grosjean style incident here. This was the tweet itself. He's now basically just said, yeah, okay, fair enough, and basically just resigned from his position and didn't decide to do anything this weekend. And kind of crazy you would actually tweet something like this, especially because there was a rather similar to a Romain Grosjean accident when we look at the Schumacher incident here in a few seconds time, where the car basically just split in two. But many other things to talk about as well. We've got to talk about FP3 then. So this kicked off on the day. Verstappen probably would have gone quickest with this lap, but made a mistake here towards this very difficult turn. Like, you go through these very fast winding corners, then you have to brake pretty dramatically, and well, the car's pretty much all the way off the ground right here. FP3 finishes like this. Charles Leclerc with a 1:29.7, Verstappen right behind him, but if anything, I think he was 3/10 up on the time that Leclerc did before he kind of made that mistake. Perez, Sainz, and already at this point, both Mercedes in a very tough spot. Hamilton down here at 11th, Russell down here in P14. Pretty sure that was their worst FP3 session in like many years, which I'm pretty sure maybe in the entire turbo hybrid era, which apart from like mechanical failures and stuff like this. So I mean, that already didn't paint the greatest picture. This also is very interesting, the fact that, I mean, look at this, right? So sector 2, sector 3, those are the faster sectors, and the Mercedes losing pretty much a second over the course of sector 2, sector 3 to the Red Bull on pretty much just pure pace in the straight lines. And look at the other cars as well. Mercedes, Aston Martin, McLaren, Williams in general, especially sector 3, basically just flat out. The Mercedes engine just not delivering the performance they were expecting. And there's many reasons for this, right? Whether it's the engine mode, I'm pretty sure like Toto said after that there was still more potential there, like turning the engine up and this type of stuff, but also the drag they seem to be experiencing and the porpoising and all these problems, like much more than some of these other teams. But yes, certainly the Mercedes engine not looking in particularly good nick right now. If you look at max speed as well from FP3, look how far down Russell and and Hamilton are right here, like way down here, 17-19, compared to Perez, who was lapping out at basically 15 kilometers per hour faster than the two Mercedes. Not something you expected to see last year. So quali gets officially underway, and I imagine Hamilton was trying to make some changes to his car because obviously they weren't happy with where it was. I believe it was like a second or so down pretty much on where Leclerc was in FP3, and he felt like, okay, some changes need to happen. Seemingly after the fact, he wanted to say, okay, we probably took it too far. Like the car was very nervous, practically undrivable, he described it as. And just watching his lap after against Russell's was kind of interesting how how different he seemed to be. He was so cautious in some of the exits and hitting some of the apexes that he just lost a lot of time in some of the more tricky corners. Obviously wasn't confident in the car, which well, resulted in a pretty remarkable Q1 exit. So first of all, it's Magnussen and Schumacher leading up the session. That, unfortunately for the Haas guys, did not last for all that long, and immediately Latifi was starting off to the track. He kind of lost it at turn 13. Thankfully, the incident was okay because there was a couple of, barriers right here. Again, these barriers, are actually, they're here to, well, take some impact, right? Some of the other barriers on the track, just the straight up concrete, is just not designed particularly well at all to soak up some of these impacts, especially at turn 10. We'll look at it in a second. But this was the real story, right? The fact that Hamilton, he had a couple of slow laps. He was wondering, so, okay, where am I losing the time? I can't really seem to make anything up. He put together a slightly better lap right at the end. Looked like it might just be good enough to sneak into Q2, would you believe? But it ends up not being. Stroll comes through. He takes the Q2 spot. Hamilton in 16th. The last time this happened, the last time he was out of a qualifying in Q1 was back at Brazil 2017. And the last time he was actually out of qualifying on pure pace, because this is when he crashed into the barriers, as you can see, was way back at the 2009 British Grand Prix. Haven't seen this happen for nearly 13 years. I believe, Max Verstappen was 11 years old when this last happened, which, that is just absolutely absurd. So yeah, he kind of talked about some of the issues. He says we went too far with some of the changes. The car was undrivable, so nervous, but just incredible, right? Because even in previous seasons, they'd have been so confident with their car that, you could run it on hards, mediums, whatever. It's going to fly through to Q3, no problem. This year, really struggled to even get into Q2. Hamilton doesn't make it. I believe Russell was actually P4 after this as well, so his setup obviously was working much better for him. He made it into Q3 as well with a pretty decent lap towards the end. But yeah, Hamilton nowhere near the pace. He's going to have to figure something out pretty dramatically overnight, right? Because these are points you can't afford to lose. Ferrari are looking to extend their lead. Red Bull are trying to catch up very quickly indeed. And yeah, just not a good sign for the Mercedes guys at all. In fairness though, Russell's car actually looked okay. Also, this was said from Adam Cooper that Hamilton might decide to start in the pits tomorrow, because at the end of the day, if you're starting P16, might as well just start at the back end in the pit lane, especially because there's probably going to be some sort of crazy incident in lap 1 where there's a safety car and he can catch up and these type of problems as well. So well, hopefully there's no some sort of crazy incident tomorrow, but still, just looking at the track, it seems more likely than not, to be perfectly honest. So maybe that's what he's going to do, make some changes, try and make up the way through the pack, because of course he needs to put some points on the board here, right, for Mercedes, but also for himself, because doesn't want to lose much more ground given the gift they got last weekend at the Bahrain Grand Prix. Then to discuss this was Schumacher's crash over at turn 10. I'm just kind of lost it on the curb here, goes slamming into this concrete wall. I saw this, I wasn't watching the screen fully, I saw this out of the corner of my eye. It just reminded me of some of the really horrific crashes we've seen across the years. So it's good to see he's okay, because this is pretty brutal, I think. I think the halo actually might have come in very usefully, because I saw one screenshot of this wheel pretty much just, well, hitting his head, but it didn't hit his head because the halo was there. So just honestly, an incredible crash. This was the footage after the fact of the car was basically split in two. And honestly, immediately after the crash concluded, there was no replays coming out. He didn't really seem to be moving in the car. I was really nervous. Thankfully, it's all okay. He got out of the car, he was conscious, he went to, get some checkups. It seems to be okay. But I think the real question about this is not just about, him and the Haas or whatever, but it's more about the track in general. The track is just so dangerous, to be honest. We feared this last year, that there was going to be something major happening right here. This came out from Haas at the time. We've heard that Mick is conscious, out of the car, currently on his way to the medical centre. So that was just great news in general. But yeah, still, just looking at this track, it's what are they thinking at times? Now, Steiner actually reckons that they're probably not going to race in tomorrow, the car, in order to fix it in time. Getting the car ready again, and probably not worth the risk, running him anyway, so probably just wait until Melbourne, right, for the Australian Grand Prix. But, yeah, still, not ideal at all. Great to see he's okay, though. And this is the big question, really, and the big talking points was about the fact the way this track is designed. Some corners have runoff sections, but in fairness, very few. And, others, like this one that Mick crashed into, pretty much just a straight-up concrete wall. No foam or anything going on. So you're going to hit that. You're going to have a pretty hefty, impact, right? Which, just goes to show that this track, man, there's so many issues with this weekend's, from the missile attack to all what was going on last night, to the kind of, drivers versus team principals and the FIA. And then we've got the track itself that we're racing on. It's just an unbelievable weekend, to be honest. I'm sure the drivers can't wait to get out of here, to be honest, but some of them are going to go away with a lot more points than the others. Let's get back to qualifying then. So Q2, Russell gets very lucky to get through to Q3 here. He almost got overtaken, but Zhou goes out, Norris, Riccardo. So in fairness, some improvement for McLaren. They're up from way at the back of the grid to kind of competing and nearly to get into Q3, which is progress. Not ideal though. Schumacher, of course, goes out too as well after putting in a decent lap, but it wasn't enough to get him through to Q3 before, of course, the incident that went down. Here we go then, moving into Q3. So Verstappen had some issues. He was talking about the fact that finding the balance on the car, warming up the tyres wasn't proving as easy as he would like it to be, and I was kind of surprised that he could only get P6 early on. I think he was at P8 at a point, and he pretty much had just one lap to make it work, and he might have done if the other drivers around him didn't improve. So right at the top of the pack, it's incredible really how it's just Red Bull and Ferrari very close, and then everyone else on the grid is so much far behind them. We'll have a look at the final classification here in a second. Leclerc goes fastest. He put in a great lap. Sainz also had a phenomenal lap. But then Perez comes out of nowhere right on the final lap and puts in an absolute beauty. Sector 2 was rapid, and it gets pole by just over 2/100ths of a second, I believe. So Sergio Perez, at 32 years of age, is on pole for the first time in his career. 215 or whatever race it is he's competed in, and now he's on pole. So an unbelievable performance. Like, yeah, as he says, could do 1,000 laps. Don't think I'd beat that lap. So you'd absolutely put in the perfect performance here. He's been closer this weekend to Verstappen than a lot of people expected, especially in qualifying, where it's very surprising. You'd have thought this would have been the other way around. But again, Perez on pole, right behind him, the two Ferraris. Verstappen can only get P4, which doesn't, well, obviously have major implications for tomorrow when Perez is on the front row alongside Leclerc, Sainz right behind him, and then Verstappen behind that. So, I mean, who knows if there's going to be a lunge down the first corner, but it's not a particularly long run right to that first corner, so not that many opportunities to make some sort of moves. Right behind him is Ocon. The Alpines are rapid. Like, honestly, the Renault engine seems very pacey, especially compared to some of the Mercedes. Now, I mean, as it turns out in Q3, George Russell manages to take off some more time, gets down to a 1:29.1, which, I mean, way quicker than what Hamilton put up a 1:30.3 in the ends. But, I mean, still a second down on where pretty much the top guys are. Look at this, right? Pretty much Perez and Leclerc on an even pegging. Then Sainz, then Verstappen 2/10 down. Then Ocon at 9/10 back, as with the rest of the field, effectively. Practically no distance at all, covering 5 all the way through 9. Gasly, I mean, it goes Alonso. Bottas gets P8, Gasly P9, Magnussen P10 at the end. Didn't have the greatest run in the Haas towards the end, but still fair play. Haas getting into Q3 once again this weekend. But it sets up an incredibly interesting race tomorrow. So the front four should just be rolling away from the pack, to be perfectly honest, but safety cars again might well bunch up the field at some points. Hopefully there's no horrific incidents like there were today. And yeah, the real question is about Mercedes. Russell managed to put his one in 6th, but Hamilton down to in 16th may well start from the pit lane and try and work his way up through the field, but not with the absolute rocket ship that he managed to take all the way to P1 at Brazil last year. But yeah, crazy day, and as Hamilton kind of says in an interview just to finish things off, looking forward to going home. Don't blame him, to be honest. Don't blame the other drivers. I'm feeling this as well. Shambolic weekend. Hopefully things don't get even worse. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.